Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Fikrat. This video continues video series dedicated to learning Microsoft Fabric. In the past few videos, we have explored different systems that are part of real-time analytics service. So we have explored KQL and event streams. When you are building your real-time system, it's very important to be able to react to different events in time. For example, if your system is monitoring IoT data coming from sensors, you may want to react to data exceeding certain range or thresholds. So today we are starting discussion around Data Activator service in Microsoft Fabric, which is designed for this kind of purposes. Join me to learn more about it. Here's a quick preview of what I'm going to cover today. We'll start by an overview of Data Activator service. So I'll explain what's the purpose of this product, how you can feed data to Data Activator, what are the main components of the Reflex item, which is a core component of Data Activator. In a demo section, we'll create ingestion from event streams to Reflex item. Then we'll move to Reflex item and continue configurations there. So we'll configure main components like properties, triggers, standard actions, which involve sending notifications like email, Teams notifications. We'll also take a look at a custom action feature, which allows you to create Power Automate flows. And if you are not familiar with Power Automate, this is a service from Microsoft which has a lot of different connectors and which can do a lot in terms of actions. So we'll create a sample Power Automate flow and I'll show how to integrate it into your Reflex trigger configuration. In the last part of my tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how you can feed a Reflex item from Fabric dashboards. A quick reminder, if you are new to my channel, please take a moment and subscribe, as that helps my channel to grow and that will help you to stay up to date with my latest videos. Thank you. Let's get started. What is Data Activator? So Data Activator is a service in Microsoft Fabric designed to monitor and react to the change in your data. It's mostly relevant to real-time data. Currently it's in a preview, so you have to subscribe to it so that it will show up in your workspace. How we can feed data to Data Activator? So data to Data Activator can come from event streams, which is part of real-time analytics service in Microsoft Fabric. Alternatively, you can also feed data coming from your dashboards, Fabric dashboards. So what are the main components of Data Activator? First of all, when we talk about Data Activator, so Reflex item is items that you work in Data Activator. Each Reflex item is specific to certain data. Within Reflex item, you can create number of different objects, including properties. So properties are coming from your data columns. So they can either represent your pure data or raw data. Alternatively, you can also apply certain aggregations on top of that raw data. So it all depends on your monitoring objectives. Then within Reflex, you can also create triggers. And the triggers are based on conditions. So you have to decide when this trigger should fire. Then you have to create actions. So actions can be standard actions like notifications, like email or Teams. Actions can also be custom. With custom actions, you can create integration between Reflex and Power Automate flows, and that will open the door to a lot more connections and actions. Let's jump into the demo. Alright, I'm in Microsoft Fabric's homepage. As a first demo, I'm gonna create sample Reflex item, which I think is easiest way to get started with Reflex. So I have selected Data Activator as a service, and under the new section, I'm gonna use Reflex sample button to create a new item. Once created, Fabric will populate this with constantly updating event streams, as well as will create all the necessary Reflex components like properties, triggers. Let me walk you through the Reflex screen. On the left-hand side, we have objects folder, which contains all of the logical objects you create. So in this case, we see that there is a package object, which represents a package. So this data represents package delivery data for logistic company. So if I select any of these events, I will see the charts on the right hand side. So as you can see, the data is divided into multiple color-coded data sets. So we can see legends at the top. So this data represents package data, and these names at the top are package IDs. And for each package ID, you will see multiple events. So similar, basically these data sets are different data sets that are related to the package delivery. And then under the properties, you have a couple of properties like city. And if I hover on any of those properties, I can see values of that. So these are apparently string properties. And at the top, we have triggers. If I select any of these triggers, I will see three main components of the trigger. First, it's a signal, which you can select from here. And the signal can be raw signal or aggregated signal. So in this case, we can see that this trigger monitors delivery attempt hours, and this data is coming from source. If I scroll down, I can see the text sections where we can determine the condition for the trigger. And at the bottom, we have a act section. So we are going to create properties and the triggers for another data set. Here, all I wanted is just to give you some taste of Reflex. Now that we have some ideas about Reflex, let's go ahead and create event streams to populate Reflex item. I'm gonna switch to Realtime Analytics service, and from home page I'm gonna use event stream button under the new, and I will assign the name. For those who are not familiar with Event Stream, very briefly, it's a tool that allows you to ingest from multiple data sources like Event Hub, IoT Hub. So this is no-code tool. You can build very quickly your event streaming pipeline using this tool without needing to code. If you would like to learn more about what are the event stream capabilities, how to ingest, and how to implement certain transformation within event streams, please take a look at a few videos that I have posted in my channel. For now, I'll just proceed with creating new data source. So I'll use new source button. And from here, I'm going to use sample data because that's easiest way to get started with event streams. I'll name my source. And I have 3 sample data choices here. So if you have noticed, bicycles data is marked as Reflex compatible. The other two are marked as high data rates. When you are ingesting into Reflex, you need to be mindful of ingestion rate, because if you try to push high rate event streams to Reflex, Reflex will try to throttle, and you may have unresponsive screen in Reflex, and so on and so forth. So Microsoft recommends that your stream should be no more than 1 or 2 events per stream at this point. For that reason, I'm going to select bicycles data, and I'm going to confirm my choice. And now I can proceed with the adding destinations. First of all, I'm going to add the Lakehouse destination. So this is something that I will use little later. So I'll name my source. We'll select my workspace. We'll select my Lakehouse. And we'll name delta table where this data should go. So I will name it like and confirm. So while destination is being added, I'm gonna add another destination, this one for Reflex. I will name that destination. We'll select my workspace, and here I have to provide Reflex item name. So you can write into existing Reflex item, but I'm gonna create a new one, and I'll name it as and will confirm. And that adds my Reflex destination. I'll give it a few minutes and come back a little later to check the status of my Reflex item. All right, my Reflex item have been created, so I'm gonna navigate to that. The first step in configuration of Reflex item is to configure the event and the objects. So at the bottom of my screen, we have data and design tabs. So your initial configuration happens in data tab. The data tab has 3 main panels. So the left panel contains all the events. If I happen to feed this Reflex item from multiple event streams, I will see multiple events here. On the central part, we have panel with data sample. So this is what we have at the top. And at the bottom, we have recent statistics in a nice chart. So we can change this. By default, it shows 24 hours history, but I can change it to 1 hour and see more detailed event charts. So this data represents bike rental data from London. There are some key components of that which should be present in each stream. So that's timestamp, because event streams are time series data. So in this case, signal timestamp is the one which is a primary timestamp for each event. And then we have key. So that's a bike point ID is a key for this data. So it represents kind of bike station ID. And then you have street information, neighborhood, and some numeric attributes like number of bikes, number of empty slots, and so on and so forth. At the right hand side, we have object configuration panel. So let's proceed with creating a new object. So I'm gonna call it bikes, and we'll select key for that. So I think it's bike point ID is the best key for that. And then I can optionally add properties. So I can add number of bikes, number of empty dogs, and the streets. Yeah, please note that I can always add properties later from design page. So I'm gonna confirm my selection. If I select events, I can see my data with color-coded key points. By default, we have 5 randomly chosen data points, but I can select or deselect some of this. So I can add this big bike points, for example. Let's take a quick look at the properties we have created. So number of bikes is something we added at the data configuration point. So this data represents raw data. So I haven't applied any aggregation to that. But let's go ahead and create another property which will monitor aggregated data. So I'm gonna use new property button, and we'll call it average number of bikes per 5 minutes. As an input data, I can select either from existing properties or from raw data itself by navigating to column and to my data source and selecting columns that are available under this source. I'm gonna use number of bikes here. Now I'm gonna add aggregate here using summarize command, and here I'm gonna select average over time. So you can see a few other available aggregate functions like count, maximum, sum, but for my purposes is average is what I need. So I'll just confirm my selection, and here I will select 5 minutes window, and then we'll save my configuration. All right, now that we know how to create properties, let's create a new trigger. I'm gonna use new trigger button, and we'll select my property. So this screen is very much like the ones we saw for properties. I'm gonna select property. So in this case, it's gonna be number of bikes. Optionally, I can select add button here to add aggregates here. This works similar way as we have seen for properties. So in other words, instead of monitoring certain conditions for your property, you can also apply certain aggregation on top of your property. So I'll just leave it as is, and then I'll scroll down to the detect section where I can configure my condition. So if I expand conditions, I can see 3 condition categories. Numeric conditions allow you to compare against numeric values. Some of them allows you to compare against absolute values, like becomes greater than something or is greater than something. There are some also relative comparison conditions, like changed by, where you can specify percentage. You can specify, you can also use enters range conditions. There are lots of different conditions, as you can see here, to address every possible monitoring situation. So I'm gonna use is greater than condition. So if I take a look at my data sets, I can see that there are a few data sets that have over 15 bikes. So I'm gonna use 15 as a threshold here. And as soon as I specify my condition, I'll see data points which match to my condition. If I scroll a little down, I can see trigger activation time as well. So these are not only for future, but it will also show you past match. Once I specify my condition, I can also optionally select from these 3 extra conditions, like each time. So each time obviously means that you will receive alerts every time when your parameter exceeds certain threshold, versus you can also say, I want to receive alerts only when my conditions are matched number of times, or I can say that I need to be notified only when my threshold is exceeded and stays there for some time. So I'll just leave it as each time and proceed to the action section. So if I expand this, I have email and the Teams message options. Custom action is grayed out because I haven't created custom action yet. So I'm gonna create email action for now, which creates email template and pre-populates necessary fields, including to, subject, headlines. Of course, you can customize it and include list of people that you want to send notification to. And optionally, you can also select available properties to be included in your alerts. So let's say I want to include number of bikes and number of empty dogs. And that's it pretty much from trigger configuration perspective. All I need is just to name my trigger. And save. Now I'm gonna start my trigger, give it some time, and come back to check my emails. So if you need to stop your trigger, you can do it from this top command bar as well. All right, so my trigger has been running for some time, and now I can see that some alerts coming to my email account. So my alert details contains all the necessary information, including the fields that I included, like number of bikes, number of empty dogs. And if I want to navigate to my Reflex item and see more details, I can use View Details button, which will navigate me to Reflex item. One thing to notice here is that I have determined my condition as an absolute condition, meaning that this applies to all the data in my stream. But in many cases, it's useful to have individual threshold for each your key points. So there is a functionality for that in Reflex. So you can use add filter button for that. However, I found that sometimes it does not show all of the properties available here. So if I expand this, I don't see properties like street, bike points, etc. I'm not sure if I am not doing something right, or maybe there is a hidden bug here. But if any of you guys happen to know, please put in the comments section. I would appreciate that. I'm gonna just remove this filter. All right, now that we know how to create basic properties and triggers, let's create a trigger with advanced actions. For that, we'll need to have custom actions functionality, which we can access from the top. I'm gonna use create button to start a new custom action window. I'm gonna name my action The second step is optional. You can have one or more fields to be added here, And this field may come from your data, like properties, or you can have something else. So let's say I'm looking for the names of people to send notification to, and I'm gonna click add. If needed, I can add more fields here. And then I can use copy button to copy connection string for Power Automate. And then I'll use create flow button to create Power Automate flow. So once created, it will add triggers. And then I need to paste my connection string to this box. Next, I'm going to add few actions here. As I mentioned earlier, Power Automate has lots of different connections to various systems, and you can pretty much do everything you want from Power Automate side. For my demo purposes, I'm going to add a couple of variable actions to demonstrate how do we pass parameters from triggers. So I'll add variable. From here, I will select initial as variable. I will name my variable. So let's say this one for name. In terms of value for this variable, I need to add expression which can extract fields from my trigger. For that reason, I'm going to use this expression, which I have borrowed from Microsoft article, which I'm going to share in the video description. And here I'll need to change field name to the name of the field I created. So I'll put it like that. And I'll add another variable following the same process. So this one will receive number of bytes. I haven't created field in my custom action configuration for that. However, I will be able to send that from trigger directly. So I'll name it like number of bytes. And I will use the same trick to extract field. And finally, I'll name my flow. And save it. So green message indicates that my configuration is okay. Alternatively, I can also use flow checker to see if there are any errors. Looks like it's clean, so now we can close this and come back to custom action screen. So my custom action screen already knows that Power Automate configuration is complete. So now I see different screen here, and then all I need is just to confirm my selection, and that will create custom actions. If you need to come back and delete custom actions, you can do that from here using delete button. For now, I'll just proceed to choose that action from my trigger configuration. So I'm gonna navigate to Act screen, and from here I will select custom action and will select my action name. And here I am presented with the name field, which I created for this action. So let's say I'll put some name here, and I can include any of the available properties. So I'll include number of bytes, number of empty docs and save it. I'm gonna give it a few minutes and come back to Power Automate screen to see how it's doing. All right, I am back in my Power Automate screen and I can see the history of my flow. I can see that it runs several times successfully. Let me pick one of the execution and examine the execution details. So each my screen was successful. If I click on trigger step, I would be able to see output. So as you can see, the values that I passed from the trigger have been passed successfully, and the property fields that I passed from trigger have also been passed successfully. That means that the mission accomplished. All right, so with that we have completed the first part of my demo. Now that we learned how to ingest data into Activator using event streams, let's take a look at the second scenario, which is ingestion from Power BI. As I mentioned earlier, this scenario could be best if you have to aggregate your data before ingesting. So in other words, if you are dealing with high rate data, so this is probably only possible. So if you remember at the beginning of demo, I have specified Lakehouse destination. Let me go to my workspace and find that table. So this is a Lakehouse, and within that I can select SQL Analytics, which works best for me if I want to build Power BI reports. So bike sample table is the one that we ingested. So let's take a quick look. So here we have all the detailed information that we have explored earlier. So we have number of bikes, number of empty dogs, and what's important, we have ingestion timestamp. So this is timestamps that is being assigned as the data goes to event stream. So what I'm going to do is to aggregate data based on this column. So I will round down this to the minute, and hopefully that will reduce number of events that we are sending to Data Activator. So I have created view here. So let me just show that view. So this view is very straightforward. It takes all the columns as is and adds and uses this expression to round down my ingestion timestamp to minute granularity. Okay, so let me run this view and take a look at the data. So this is my ingestion timestamp, and this is how my rounded data looks like. Okay, now I'm gonna create Power BI report from this view. So I will select this and hit new report button. And within Power BI, I'm gonna add line chart. This is my table, so this is my view. And from here, I will add rounded column to my x-axis. And number of bikes to my y-axis. Of course, you can add more columns as needed, but I will keep it simple. I'll change my aggregate function to average, and we'll add bike point ID as a legend to this data. Okay, so my report is ready, and now I'm gonna use this three dots button at the top and select set alert command. Here I can make a further configuration to my alerts. I can change my signal from measure column. Then I can select notification type, email or Teams. And then I'm gonna select my workspace and Reflex item. So I'm gonna select Reflex items that we explored earlier and confirm my selection, and that should add my data to my Reflex item. Now let me navigate to my Reflex item and take a look at my alert. Alright, I am in my Reflex item, and as you can see, we have second object added from Power BI, and we have triggers added here. So let's take a look at my data. So right now I don't see anything that exceeds 20. If needed, I can further customize my trigger here. So let me stop this and change my threshold, because I see that my numbers actually do not exceed 20. So I'll set new threshold as 15 and see what happens. Now I can see triggers firing, and my action is already pre-configured, but if needed, I can further customize my action as well. So once satisfied, I'll save my configuration and I will start my trigger, and the rest should work as we discussed. All right, I'd like to wrap up our discussion here. To recap, we have learned how to create Reflex item from event stream and Fabric dashboard. We have also looked at different components within Reflex item, components like properties, triggers, actions. Finally, we also created custom actions using Power Automate flows and integrated them to Reflex triggers. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next videos.